I drove back to Briar Glen with a master's degree on the passenger seat, believing I had finally earned my place at the table. But when I walked into the showroom, the lights were blazing for a party I had not been told about. My father had quietly signed our legacy over to my younger sister, and my mother delivered the line that cut the deepest. She told me I was never meant to run it. She was wrong. The highway stretched out before me, a gray ribbon cutting through the lush, rolling hills of southern Ohio. On the passenger seat of my car sat a black graduation cap and a velvet-trimmed hood, tossed casually atop a pile of textbooks I would never have to open again. It was over. The 2-year master's program, which had actually taken me 5 years to complete, was finally finished. I was 33 years old, and for the first time in a decade, I felt light. I rolled down the window, letting the humid June air rush into the cabin. It smelled of damp earth and cut grass, the specific perfume of the Midwest in early summer. Most people in my cohort were heading to celebrations in Chicago or New York, chasing high-rise jobs with signing bonuses that sounded like lottery winnings. I was driving home to Briar Glen, a river town that time seemed to have forgotten, to a mid-sized cabinetry and remodeling company that smelled of sawdust and lemon polish, Ward and Finch kitchens. It was not a Fortune 500 company, it was not a tech startup, but it was ours. My grandfather, Silas Ward, had built it from a single workbench in a garage. My father, Grant, had expanded it into a regional name, and I had saved it. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, the memory of 4 years ago surfacing unbidden. We had faced a staffing crisis that nearly shuttered the showroom doors. I had dropped out of my first semester of grad school, moved back into my childhood bedroom, and worked 60-hour weeks managing supply chains and soothing furious clients while my father recovered from a minor heart scare. I had held the line. I had proven myself. Now, with the degree finally in hand, I was coming back to claim the partnership my father and I had discussed in the abstract for years. I imagined the dinner waiting for me, just the 4 of us. Mom would have made a roast. Dad would open a bottle of the good red wine he kept in the cellar, and Elise, my younger sister, would be there, likely checking her phone but happy enough to see me. We would toast to the future. I would finally be seen not just as the dutiful daughter, but as the successor. The sun was setting as I crossed the bridge into Briar Glen. The river below was a sheet of copper, reflecting the fading light. I drove past the old brick storefronts of Main Street, turning onto the access road that led to the industrial park where Ward and Finch occupied a sprawling, modern facility. I expected the parking lot to be empty. It was 7 in the evening on a Tuesday. The crews should have been home. The showroom should have been dark. Instead, the lot was full. My stomach gave a strange, sharp lurch. I slowed the car, navigating past vehicles I did not recognize. There was a sleek black sedan with out-of-state plates, a few luxury SUVs, and the familiar trucks of our senior staff. The showroom windows, usually dimmed to a soft glow at night to save on electricity, were blazing. Light spilled out onto the asphalt, illuminating the manicured shrubs my mother insisted on replanting every spring. I parked my car in the far corner, grabbing my purse but leaving the graduation cap on the seat. I did not need a prop. I needed an explanation. Walking toward the glass double doors, I could hear the hum of conversation and the clink of glassware. A banner hung inside the foyer, but it was facing inward, so I could only see the white backing. I pushed the doors open and stepped into the air-conditioned chill. The showroom had been transformed. The kitchen vignettes, the farmhouse oak, the modern slate, the classic cherry, were serving as staging areas for a cocktail party. Waiters in black vests were circulating with trays of champagne. I recognized the faces in the crowd immediately, and the sight of them froze me in place. There was Nora Klein, our operations manager, holding a glass of white wine and looking uncomfortable near the reception desk. There was Mr. Henderson from the local bank, laughing loudly at something a man in a gray suit was saying. There were the shift supervisors from the workshop, looking scrubbed and stiff in their Sunday best. And there was my family. My father, Grant Ward, stood near the center island of the display we called the Monarch Suite. He looked flushed, his silver hair combed back perfectly, a glass raised in his hand. Beside him stood Elise. My sister looked like a porcelain doll that had been placed on a high shelf and left there. She was wearing a cream-colored dress that washed her out. Her blonde hair pulled back so tightly it pulled at her temples. She was not smiling. My mother, Cynthia, was flitting between groups of people, her laugh tinkling above the ambient noise like breaking glass. She spotted me first. Her eyes widened, just for a fraction of a second, before she composed her face into a mask of delighted surprise. It was a look I knew well. It was the look she used when a client pointed out a scratch in a cabinet door, the look that said everything was perfectly fine even when it wasn't. "Madeline!" she called out, her voice pitching up. "You made it!" The room turned. The conversation dipped. I walked forward, my heels clicking loudly on the polished concrete floor. I felt like an intruder in my own life. "I thought we were having dinner at the house," I said, keeping my voice level. I did not know we were hosting an event. My father stepped forward, beaming. He looked too happy. It was a frantic, wide-eyed kind of happiness that did not reach his shoulders, which were hunched up toward his ears. "Surprise!" he boomed. "We couldn't let your big day go by without a proper toast, could we? But actually, Maddie, the timing is perfect, truly perfect. Come in, come in." He gestured for me to join them at the Monarch Island. I moved through the crowd, nodding to employees who met my gaze with strange, shifting expressions. Nora Klein offered me a tight, grim smile and looked down at her shoes. Something was wrong. The air in the room felt heavy, charged with a static electricity that made the hair on my arms stand up. I reached the island. Elise did not look at me. She was staring at a spot on the floor, her hands gripping an untouched flute of champagne so hard her knuckles were white. "Dad," I said, lowering my voice so only the family could hear. "What is going on? Who are all these people?" "Friends, partners," my father said, ignoring my tone. He turned back to the room, raising his voice to address the crowd. "Everyone, if I could have your attention for a moment." The room went silent. The waiter stopped moving, as many of you know. My father started this sentiment with a hammer and a dream. He began, "He loved the rhetoric of the self-made man. And for 40 years, I have carried that hammer. But a business like Ward and Finch is not just about wood and glue. It is about blood. It is about legacy." He put an arm around Elise's shoulders. She flinched, a microscopic movement that only a sister would notice. I stood a few feet away, clutching my purse, waiting for him to gesture to me, waiting for the acknowledgement of the degree, the years of work, the sacrifice. "I have been doing a lot of thinking about the future." My father continued, "About what this company needs to thrive in the next generation. We need fresh energy, we need continuity, and so, it is with a heart full of pride that I announce my retirement as CEO of Ward and Finch Kitchens." The room broke into polite, confused murmurs. He had never mentioned retiring, not once, and while he said, raising his voice over the noise, "I am thrillingly proud to introduce you to the new controlling owner and chief executive officer, Elise Ward," the silence that followed was absolute. It lasted for 3 heartbeats, long enough for the words to settle into the marrow of my bones. Elise, not Madeline. Elise. Then, the applause started. It was scattered at first, then dutifully loud. Mr. Henderson from the bank clapped vigorously. The man in the gray suit, the stranger, nodded with a small, satisfied smile. I did not clap. I could not breathe. I looked at Elise. She finally looked up, her blue eyes wide and swimming with panic. She looked like a deer trapped in the headlights of an oncoming semi-truck. She opened her mouth as if to speak, to say no, to explain. But my father squeezed her shoulder again, and she shut it. "Madeline," the voice came from my left. I turned to find my mother standing right beside me. She gripped my elbow with fingers that felt like steel talons. "Smile," she hissed under her breath. "Everyone is watching. I am not smiling. I whispered back, my voice trembling. What is this? Mom? Dad gave the company to Elise? Elise? She doesn't even know how to read a balance sheet. She hates the business. Keep your voice down, my mother commanded. She steered me away from the center of the room, toward the alcove where we displayed the bathroom vanities. It was semi-private, shielded by a wall of samples. When we were out of direct sight, she let go of my arm and smoothed the front of her silk blouse. Her face was hard. The mask was gone. Your father made a decision. She said, "It is done. I spent 5 years getting a master's degree for this." I said, the shock beginning to curdle into anger. I saved this floor when Dad was sick. I know every vendor, every client, every margin. Elise is a graphic designer. She hasn't set foot in the workshop since high school. It is not about the work. Madeline, my mother said, her voice was terrifyingly calm. It is about the face of the company. Elise represents the fresh start we need. A fresh start? I asked. We are a heritage brand. My mother sighed, a sound of profound impatience. She stepped closer, invading my personal space. The smell of her expensive floral perfume, usually comforting, suddenly made me nauseous. Listen to me, she said softly. You were never meant for the business. Madeline. The words landed like physical blows. I took a half step back, colliding with a display of quartz countertops. Excuse me? I said. You are too intense, she said, searching for the word. You are rigid. You worry about the details too much. You make people uncomfortable. I make people accountable. I corrected her. Exactly. She said, as if I had proven her point. It is not what we need right now. We need warmth. We need charm. Elise has that. You. She paused, looking me up and down, taking in my plain blazer, my practical shoes, the lack of jewelry. You are better when you are away, she said. The cruelty of it was so casual. It was not said with malice, which would have been easier to handle. It was said as a fact, like stating the weather. You are better when you are away. I felt a stinging sensation behind my eyes, the threat of tears, but I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted copper. I would not cry, not here, not in front of her. I see, I said. My voice sounded strange, hollowed out. I straightened my jacket. I need a drink. My mother studied me for a second longer, checking for cracks in the porcelain, seeming satisfied that I would not cause a scene. She patted my arm. Good, she said. Be happy for your sister. She is terrified. She needs your support. She turned and walked back into the party, instantly transforming back into the gracious hostess. I stood in the alcove for a long minute, breathing in through my nose and out through my mouth. 1, 2, 3. The anger was a cold knot in my stomach. I walked back out into the showroom. I did not go to my family. Instead, I moved to the edge of the room, near a pillar, and watched. I watched with the eyes of a person who had spent the last 2 years analyzing business case studies. I looked past the champagne and the smiles. The first thing I noticed was the slide deck projected on the wall behind the Monarch suite. It was looping through a presentation. The logo was different. The classic Ward and Finch serif font, unchanged since 1982, had been replaced by a thin, modern sans serif. The color palette had shifted from deep forest green to a sterile tech bro blue. I scanned the room for the stranger, the man in the gray suit. He was tall, polished, wearing a watch that cost more than my car. He didn't look like a customer. He didn't look like a supplier. He was standing with Simon Vale, our company accountant. Simon was a nervous man in the best of times, but now he looked positively ill. He was sweating. The stranger was talking low and close, tapping a folder he held in his hand. Simon was nodding rapidly, like a bobblehead. I moved closer, pretending to examine a faucet display, trying to catch a drift of their conversation. Reclassification of the assets is priority 1. The stranger was saying, his voice was smooth, devoid of accent. We need the Q2 numbers to reflect the new structure by Friday, but the depreciation schedule. Simon started. Don't worry about the schedule, the stranger interrupted gently. Just handle the categorization. We will manage the audit risk. I frowned. Audit risk? Reclassification? Who is that? I asked a voice beside me. It was one of the junior sales associates, a young woman named Kyla. She jumped, startled. Oh, hi, Madeline. Congrats on graduating. Thanks. Kyla, I said, keeping my eyes on the stranger. Who is the guy in the gray suit? That is Mr. Sterling, she whispered. He is with the strategic partners. Strategic partners? I asked. We don't have strategic partners. Dad has always refused private equity. He calls them vultures. I don't know, Kyla said, shrugging. They have been here all week. They brought the new signage. I looked back at the slide deck. In the bottom corner of the final slide, in tiny print, it read, Advisory Services Provided by Calder Group. My father was laughing across the room, accepting a handshake from the mayor. He looked relieved, unburdened. I made my way toward Elise. She had managed to extricate herself from Dad's grip and was standing near the buffet, staring at a tray of crab cakes. Elise, I said. She flinched so hard she nearly dropped her glass. She turned to face me, and up close, the damage was visible. Her makeup was expertly applied, but it couldn't hide the dark circles under her eyes. She was trembling. Maddie, she breathed. I didn't know you were coming tonight. I knew you were coming home, but I didn't know about the party. When did this happen? I asked. When did you agree to this? She looked around, checking to see if Mom was watching. Last week, she whispered. Dad is tired. Maddie. He sat me down. He said he couldn't do it anymore. He said the stress was killing him. So he gave it to you? I asked. Why not call me? I was 1 week away from coming home. He said it had to be now. Elise said, her eyes filled with tears. He said if we didn't do it now, there wouldn't be a company to come back to. What does that mean? I asked sharply. Is the company in trouble? No, she said, too quickly. It's just the market, the changes. This is what Dad needs right now. She repeated the phrase like a mantra. This is what Dad needs right now. It sounded rehearsed. It sounded like something Mom would write on a note card. Elise, I said, grabbing her wrist gently. Who is the Calder Group? Her face went completely white. I have to go, she said, pulling her hand away. I have to. Mom is waving at me. She hurried away, disappearing into the crowd. I stayed at the party for another hour. I shook hands. I smiled until my face hurt. I accepted congratulations on my graduation from people who had no idea I had just been disinherited. When the crowd finally thinned and my parents went to walk the banker out to his car, I slipped away. I went through the employees-only door at the back of the showroom and climbed the wooden stairs to the second floor. The administrative offices were dark and quiet. The smell of old paper and coffee was familiar, a scent that usually brought me peace. I walked down the hallway to the executive office at the end. It had been my grandfather's office, even after he died. Dad had kept it mostly the same. I pushed the door open and flipped the light switch. I stopped. The room was different. The heavy oak desk was there, but the clutter was gone. The stacks of blueprints, the jars of pens, the photos of us as children, all swept clean. But it was the wall behind the desk that stopped my heart. For 30 years, a framed letter had hung there. It was my grandfather's mission statement, typed on a typewriter in 1978. It was simple, full of grammatical errors, and beautiful. We build things that last for people who live in them. Don't cut corners. Don't lie about the wood. Treat the name like it is the only asset you actually own. It was gone. In its place hung a poster. It was sleek, framed in black metal. It showed a generic image of a glass skyscraper and a single word in bold. White text. Growth. It was so corporate, so impersonal, so utterly unlike us that I felt a laugh bubbling up in my throat. It was a hysterical, dangerous laugh. I walked behind the desk and sat in the leather chair. It squeaked, a familiar sound. I woke up the computer terminal. I needed to see the books. I needed to see what strategic partner meant. I needed to see why my father, a man who hoarded control like a dragon hoards gold, had suddenly handed the keys to a daughter who was afraid of her own shadow. I typed in my username, M. Ward. I typed in my password. The screen flashed red. Access denied. I frowned. I tried again. Maybe I mistyped it. Access denied. Account suspended. I sat back. The glow of the monitor illuminating my face. Suspended. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number for Gary, our IT contractor. He was a local guy, someone I had known since high school. He answered on the second ring. Hello? Gary? It's Madeline. I said, I'm at the office. I can't get into the system. There was a long pause on the other end. Gary? Yeah. Maddie. I'm here, he said. His voice was awkward. Look, I can't unlock it. Why not? I asked. Did the server reset? No. He said, I got a ticket 2 weeks ago. Request from the top. Revoke all access for user M. Ward. Effective immediately. 2 weeks ago. Who sent the request? Gary? I asked. It came from Grant's email. He said, but it was CC'd to that new firm. The legal team. What legal team? Harrow and Bristow. He said, never heard of them before. Look, Maddie, I gotta go. I'm sorry. The line went dead. I put the phone down on the empty desk. 2 weeks ago, while I was taking my final exams, while I was packing up my apartment, excited to come home, while I was thinking about how to expand our sustainable lumber sourcing, they had been erasing me. My mother's voice echoed in my head. You were never meant for the business. It wasn't just that they didn't want me. They had prepared for my return like I was a hostile entity. They had locked the doors. They had changed the locks. I looked up at the generic growth poster. I could go downstairs right now. I could scream. I could flip a table. I could demand to know why they had betrayed me. But I knew what would happen. Mom would call me hysterical. Dad would look sad and say this was exactly why I wasn't cut out for leadership. Because I was too emotional. Elise would cry, and I would look like the villain. No. I opened the bottom drawer of the desk, hoping to find a notepad. It was empty. I reached into my purse and pulled out the small notebook I always carried. I clicked my pen. I wrote down the date. I wrote down Calder Group. I wrote down Harrow and Bristow. I wrote down mission statement removed. I wrote down access revoked 2 weeks prior. My hand was steady. If they wanted me to be away, I would be away, but I would not be blind. This wasn't a succession plan. This was a cover-up. You don't bring in strategic partners and high-end lawyers for a simple family transfer. You don't lock out the only person who understands the financials unless you are hiding something in the numbers. Elise wasn't the CEO. She was the fall guy. I closed the notebook and slipped it back into my bag. I stood up and pushed the chair in. I walked out of the office and turned off the light, leaving the room in darkness. I went down the back stairs and out the side door, into the humid Ohio night. The party was still going on inside. I could hear the muffled sound of laughter. I got into my car. I did not look back at the showroom. I put the car in gear and drove toward the small apartment I had rented in town, a place I had thought would be temporary until I settled back in. I was not going to burn the house down, not yet. First, I was going to find out who had poured the gasoline. The morning sun hit the sawdust in the air, turning the workshop into a cathedral of golden light and floating particles. I stood at the edge of the loading bay, breathing in the scent of raw oak and industrial adhesive. This was the smell of my childhood. It was the smell of Saturday mornings spent sweeping floors for pocket money, and later, the smell of late nights spent ensuring a custom island for a picky client was finished on schedule. It was 6 o'clock in the morning. My father, Grant Ward, had always been an early riser. He believed that the boss should unlock the doors, a ritual he had inherited from his father and one he performed with a religious sort of dedication. I found him near the CNC router, inspecting a stack of maple panels. He was wearing his shop coat, the one with his name embroidered in blue thread over the pocket. He looked younger here than he had in the showroom the night before. The tension that had tightened his face was gone, replaced by the easy, confident set of his jaw that I had spent my life trying to emulate. "Morning, Dad," I said. He jumped slightly, then turned, his face breaking into a wide, practiced smile. "Maddie, you are up early? Jet lag?" "I drove. Remember?" I said, walking over to him. "I did not fly." Right. Of course." He put a hand on my shoulder, squeezing it firmly. "I am glad you are here." "Actually," he said, steering me away from the machinery and toward the small, glass-walled office that overlooked the floor, "I wanted to talk to you about yesterday. I know it was a bit of a shock." "A shock?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "I thought I was coming home to work alongside you. Instead, I find out from a PowerPoint presentation that you have retired and Elise is running the company." He sighed, a long, heavy exhale that smelled of coffee and peppermint. He opened the door to the office and gestured for me to sit in one of the guest chairs. He sat behind the desk, a smaller, more battered version of the one upstairs. "It moved faster than we anticipated," he said. "The opportunity with the investors, with the partners, it required decisive action. And Elise, well, she has a vision. Elise has a degree in graphic design." "Dad," I said, "she has never negotiated a contract. She does not know the difference between a lien and a loan. That is why she has support," he said, his voice rising slightly before he caught himself. He leaned forward, clasping his hands on the desk. "Look, Madeline, your mother and I, we know how hard you worked for that degree. We are proud of you, immensely proud." "But," I prompted. "But we think your talents are best suited for a different kind of role," he said. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was a job description. I could tell by the formatting. "Director of Community Relations." I read aloud. "It is a vital role," he said quickly. "We need someone to interface with the town, the Chamber of Commerce, the charity drives, the scholarship fund. You are articulate. Madeline, you are smart. You would be the face of the family in Briar Glen." I looked up from the paper. "This is a figurehead position," I said. "There are no operational responsibilities, no financial oversight, no strategic input. It is a bridge," he insisted, "a way for you to settle back in without the pressure of the day-to-day grind. You have been gone for 2 years. Things have changed." I put the paper back on the desk. "I do not want to plan charity galas. Dad, I want to know why you brought in outside investors when we have been profitable for 40 years. I want to know why you restructured the company without a board meeting." His smile faltered. The warmth evaporated from his eyes, leaving them cold and hard. "You are asking the wrong questions," he said. "Am I? Or am I just the only one asking them?" He stood up, signaling the end of the conversation. "Take the week. Madeline, rest. Think about the offer. It is a good salary, a nice life. Do not complicate things that are already settled." I walked out of the office, my heart hammering against my ribs. He had not looked me in the eye when he said it was settled. He was hiding something, and he was terrified I would find it. I did not go home. Instead, I waited until the first shift arrived at 7, the floor filled with the sound of boots on concrete and the chatter of the crew. I waved to a few familiar faces, but I made a beeline for the inventory cage. Nora Klein was there, holding a clipboard and looking at a pallet of hinges with deep suspicion. Nora had been with Ward and Finch since I was 5 years old. She was a woman of few words and zero patience for incompetence. "Nora," I said. She looked up, and her expression softened. "Madeline," she said. She put the clipboard down and wiped her hands on her jeans. "I saw you last night. I didn't get a chance to say hello before your mother. Well, before she swept me away?" I finished. Nora nodded. She looked around to make sure we were alone. The forklift was beeping in the distance, providing a layer of cover. "It is a mess, Maddie," she said, her voice low. "Tell me," I said. She sighed, leaning back against the wire mesh of the cage. "It happened about 3 months ago," she said. "Your dad started taking meetings with these suits, not local guys, Chicago guys. Then, about 4 weeks ago, everything went into hyperdrive. 4 weeks ago," I repeated. Just before I finished my thesis, they brought in this new law firm," she continued. "Harrow and Bristow. I have never heard of them. They sent over a stack of contracts thick enough to choke a horse. Usually, we use old Mr. Abernathy for everything. Your dad fired him." "He fired Abernathy?" I asked, shocked. Mr. Abernathy had written my grandfather's will. He was practically family. "Terminated for cause, apparently," Nora said with a scoff. "Though nobody knows what the cause was. The new lawyers. They didn't even ask for the inventory logs. They just prepared the transfer documents. It was like they had the numbers already filled in before they even looked at the books. That is reckless." I said, "It is worse than that." Nora said, "It is wrong. The transfer of the CEO title? It usually takes 6 months of transition. This was done in an afternoon. Elise signed the papers on a Tuesday, and by Wednesday, the Calder Group people were measuring the office for new carpet." "Calder Group." I said, "That is the strategic partner." Nora nodded. "I do not like them." Maddie. "They walk around here like they own the place. And that guy? Sterling? He asked me for the liquidation value of the heavy machinery yesterday." "Liquidation value?" I felt a chill run down my spine. You only ask for liquidation value if you are planning to sell the assets. I thought we were growing. I said, "That is what the poster says." Nora snorted. "Growth. That is just a word they put on the wall to keep us quiet." I reached out and squeezed her arm. "Thank you." "Nora, watch your back," she whispered. "This isn't the same company you left." I left the workshop and drove into town. Briar Glen was waking up. The coffee shop on Main Street had a line out the door, and the street sweepers were making their rounds. I drove past the high school and turned into the parking lot of Riverbend Federal Credit Union. My grandfather had banked here. My father banked here. I had opened my first savings account here when I was 8. It was a small building, brick and ivy, with a sign that promised personal service. I walked inside. The teller, a woman named Mrs. Higgins who had given me lollipops as a child, waved from behind the glass. I waved back, but asked to see the branch manager, David Ross. David was in his office. He looked surprised to see me, but he stood up and shook my hand warmly. "Madeline, congrats on the Masters. We heard you were back. Word travels fast," I said, taking a seat. "Small town," he said with a smile. "What can I do for you? Looking for a mortgage?" "Not yet." I said, "I am actually here about the business." His smile tightened just a fraction. "Oh? I know I am not a signatory on the main operating accounts anymore," I said, lying smoothly. I assumed my father had removed me years ago, though I suspected he hadn't bothered until recently. But as a shareholder, I wanted to double-check something regarding the credit line restructuring. David hesitated. He shifted in his chair, tapping a pen against his notepad. "Madeline, you know I can't discuss specific transaction details without your father present. Privacy laws and all that. I understand," I said, keeping my voice light. "I am not asking for balances. I just wanted to confirm the board consent forms were filed correctly. Dad mentioned there was a rush to get the new facility approved before the quarter ended, and I know how much of a stickler the underwriters can be about meeting minutes. I was gambling. I was betting that there had been a restructuring, based on the sudden influx of cash for the party and the renovations, and I was betting that my father, who hated paperwork, might have cut corners." David looked relieved that I wasn't asking for money. "Yes. Well, it was a bit of a scramble," he admitted. "We usually require a full board resolution for a credit facility of that size, especially with the collateral shift." "Collateral shift?" I asked, keeping my face impassive. "Moving the primary lien from the revenue stream to the real estate," he said, dropping his voice. "Standard for a restructuring. But yes, we got the signatures. Your father and your mother signed off as the majority directors. And the minority shareholders?" I asked. He paused. "Your father provided a waiver," he said, stated that the minority interests were silent. I felt the blood drain from my face. "Silent. Right," I said. "Of course, just wanted to make sure the paperwork was clean. You know how the new partners are?" David nodded. "Efficient, a bit aggressive, if you ask me. But your dad seems to think they are the future. I stood up, my knees feeling shaky. Thanks, David. Good to see you. I walked out of the bank and sat in my car for 10 minutes, staring at the steering wheel. A collateral shift. They had moved the loan security from the cash flow, which was healthy, to the real estate, the building, the land, my grandfather's legacy. If the company defaulted on this new, likely massive loan, the bank wouldn't just take the cash. They would take the property. They would take the workshop. And my father had signed a waiver claiming I was silent. I started the car and drove back toward the industrial park. But I didn't go to the main entrance. I parked around the back and used my key to enter the side door that led directly to the upstairs offices. It was lunchtime. The hallway was empty. I slipped into the executive office. It was empty. The generic growth poster was still there, mocking me. I went behind the desk. I wasn't looking for computer files this time. I was looking for something older. My grandfather, Silas, had been a man of secrets. He didn't trust computers. He trusted wood and steel. He had built this desk himself, and he had shown me, when I was 12, the trick to the bottom drawer. You have to lift it up before you pull. Maddie, he had said, that is where I keep the things that matter. I crouched down. I lifted the drawer and pulled. It stuck. I frowned. I pulled harder. It slid open with a grinding noise. I looked at the mechanism. The wood was splintered. The latch had been forced. Someone had pried this drawer open with a screwdriver or a crowbar. My heart sank. I reached into the back of the drawer. It was empty. There had been an envelope there, a thick, manila envelope sealed with wax. He had showed it to me once. M. Ward, if you come back, it had said in his shaky cursive. What is in there? Grandpa? I had asked. Insurance, he had said. For when the wolves come, it was gone. I ran my fingers over the splintered wood. The damage was fresh. The raw wood was still light-colored, not yet oxidized. They had found it. They had broken in and taken it. I stood up, dusting off my knees. I needed to talk to Elise. I texted her. Meet me at the Bluebird, 1 p.m., alone. Please. She replied 3 minutes later. Okay. The Bluebird Diner was a relic of the 50s. All chrome and neon and waitresses who called you honey. It was neutral ground. We used to come here after school for milkshakes. Elise was waiting in a booth in the back. She was wearing a trench coat, belting it tightly around her waist, as if she were afraid she might fly apart. She had sunglasses on, which she took off as I slid into the seat across from her. Her eyes were red-rimmed. Did you order? I asked. I am not hungry, she said. Her voice was brittle. I ordered 2 coffees. When the waitress left, I leaned across the table. Elise, look at me. She looked up, her chin trembling. I know you didn't ask for this, I said softly. I really didn't, she whispered. I told them. Maddie, I told them you were the one. I told them I wanted to open my studio. I don't know anything about supply chains. Then why did you sign? I asked. She looked down at her hands. They were shaking. Mom came to my apartment. She said. She was crying, like really crying. I have never seen her like that. She said Dad was in trouble. What kind of trouble? She wouldn't say. She just said that if we didn't make these changes, if we didn't bring in the partners, we would lose everything. The house, the business, the pension, everything. She looked up at me, her eyes pleading. She said this was the only way to keep the company safe. She said they needed a CEO who would cooperate. And I wouldn't cooperate? I asked. She said you would ask too many questions, Elise admitted. She said you would fight the partners and scare them away. She begged me. Maddie, she said, do not make things worse. Do it for your father. I felt a surge of nausea. Emotional blackmail. It was my mother's signature move, but she had never deployed it with such high stakes. Who are the partners? Elise? Who is the Calder Group? Elise flinched at the name. I don't know. She said, I met Mr. Sterling once. He is scary. Maddie. He smiles a lot, but his eyes are dead. He brought a stack of papers to the house. Mom made me sign them. Did you read them? There were hundreds of pages, she cried softly. Dad said the lawyers had already approved them. Which lawyers? Harrow and Bristow? Yes, them. Elise, I said, reaching across the table to cover her shaking hand with mine. Did you know they put the building up as collateral? She froze. What? The building? I said, the factory, the land. They restructured the debt. If the company fails, the bank takes the legacy. No, she whispered. Dad said it was just a bridge loan, to help with cash flow until the new markets opened up. There are no new markets. Elise, I said grimly, we are a regional cabinetry firm. We are not launching a tech app. She pulled her hand away and covered her mouth. Oh my God, she said. What have I done? You didn't do anything. I said firmly, you were used, but now we have to fix it. I can't, she said, shaking her head frantically. I can't quit. The contract. There is a clause. If I step down within 2 years, there is a penalty, a financial penalty. Against whom? Against me, she whispered. Personally, I stared at her. My parents had let their daughter sign a contract that held her personally liable for a business she didn't understand. That wasn't just fear, that was predatory. I sat back in the booth, my mind racing. This was a containment strategy. They knew I was coming back. They knew I would look at the books. They knew I would find the trouble my mother had alluded to. So they locked me out. They put a puppet in the CEO chair, my own sister, and bound her with liability so she couldn't leave. They brought in partners to inject cash and bury the evidence. But what was the trouble? What was so bad that they would sacrifice their children to hide it? I left Elise at the diner. I told her to sit tight, to sign nothing else, and to forward me any emails she could get away with. She looked terrified, but relieved to have shared the burden. I needed one more piece of the puzzle. I drove back to the warehouse. I parked in the loading zone and walked around to the back, where the old archive storage was. It was a dusty room behind the boiler, filled with bankers' boxes dating back to the 80s. I found Kenny, the custodian, sweeping the hallway. Kenny was 60 years old and knew where every skeleton was buried, mostly because he had cleaned up the dust around them. "Hey, Kenny," I said. "Miss Madeline?" he said, leaning on his broom. "Good to see you back. Shame about the party." "Yeah, shame," I said. "Hey, I am looking for some old files, from about 6 years ago, the project files for the Riverside estate job." "6 years ago?" He scratched his chin. "You might be out of luck." "Miss, why is that?" "Funny thing," he said. "Couple of weeks back, your mom comes down here, with that lawyer fella. They loaded up a whole cart of boxes, said they needed to be digitized." "Digitized?" I asked. "We scan everything on site. That is what I said," Kenny replied. "But they took them, put them right in the back of the lawyer's car. Do you remember what years they were?" Kenny thought for a moment. "I think it was 2018 and 2019. Mostly. Maybe a bit of 2017. 2018, the year I left for grad school the first time, before I came back to help. Thanks, Kenny." I walked back to my car. 2018. What happened in 2018? "We had a good year. We expanded the showroom. I paused, my hand on the door handle. 2018 was the year we settled the lawsuit with the subcontractor who got injured. Or, that was what Dad told me. He said it was handled. He said insurance covered it. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I had been given by a friend in law school. Tessa Marlowe. She was a corporate litigator in Cincinnati. Sharp, expensive, and unconnected to Briar Glen. "Tessa, it is Madeline Ward." "Madeline," she answered, her voice crisp. "I heard you graduated." "I did. I need to hire you. Business or personal?" "Both." I said, "I am a minority shareholder in a family business. I think I have been defrauded, and I think my sister is being used as a shield for asset stripping." I heard the sound of a pen clicking on the other end. "Start talking," she said. I told her everything. The party, the lockout, the missing envelope, the credit union, Elise's contract, the missing files. When I finished, there was a silence on the line. "Okay," Tessa said. "Here's the reality. Family transfers are the easiest way to hide dirty laundry. If they transferred the shares to your sister, and she accepted, she is the legal owner. If she signed a contract with a liability clause, she is on the hook. Can we void it?" I asked. "If she was under duress?" "Duress is hard to prove," Tessa said. "Emotional manipulation isn't a legal defense, unfortunately. But the shareholder angle, that is your wedge." "How?" "If you are a beneficiary of a trust, or if you hold shares directly, you have statutory rights, inspection rights. You can demand the books, not just the summaries, the general ledger, the bank records, the board minutes." "They said there were no minutes." Tessa laughed. A dry, sharp sound. "There are always minutes, Madeline, and if there aren't, that is a breach of fiduciary duty. So what do I do?" I asked. "Do I sue?" "Not yet," she advised. "If you file a lawsuit now, they will circle the wagons. They will paint you as the bitter sister who didn't get the crown. The partners will use their lawyers to bury you in paper for 5 years. So I do nothing?" "No," she said. "You go back in. You take the job." "The charity job?" I asked, disgusted. "Take the job," Tessa repeated. "Get inside the building. Be the dutiful daughter. Smile. Rebuild your relationships with the staff. And while you are doing that, we file a formal Section 220 demand for books and records. We force them to hand over the documents legally. While you are there to interpret them, it is a Trojan horse strategy." I said, "Exactly," she said. "Make them think you have accepted your fate. Make them relax. People get sloppy when they think they have won." I hung up the phone. I sat in the car, watching the sun dip lower in the sky. It was casting long shadows across the factory walls. My mother wanted me to be away. My father wanted me to handle community relations. They wanted me to be a safe, silent ornament. I would give them what they wanted. I would take the job. I would plan their charity gala. I would smile at their partners. But I would be watching. I would be documenting. And I would find out what was in those boxes from 2018 and why my grandfather's letter had been stolen. I started the engine. I wasn't going to burn the house down. I was going to walk through the front door, lock it behind me, and find the rot in the floorboards. I drove toward my parents' house to accept the job. My new office was a renovated storage closet off the main lobby. It had no windows, a desk that was slightly too small for my chair, and a plaque on the door that read, "Director of Community Relations," in a font that did not match the rest of the building. It was a calculated insult. My father wanted me close enough to control but far enough away to be irrelevant. He wanted me planning the annual potluck and the charity golf tournament. Safely removed from the profit and loss statements, I took the job anyway. For the first week, I played the part. I arrived at 8:30 sharp, wearing non-threatening cardigans and a smile that I plastered on in the rearview mirror of my car. I ordered the catering for the quarterly safety meeting. I drafted a press release about our donation to the local high school woodshop program. I was, to all appearances, the dutiful daughter accepting her diminished place in the hierarchy. But the role gave me one crucial advantage. It gave me a badge. I had the run of the building. No one questions the community relations director wandering through the workshop with a clipboard. They assume she is looking for a photo opportunity or checking on a donation. I spent my mornings in the office answering emails, and my afternoons on the floor. The workshop was where the truth lived. You could fudge a spreadsheet, but you could not fake the hum of a CNC machine or the rhythm of the sanding line. The men and women on the floor knew me. I had spent my summers here since I was 16. I had swept sawdust with Kenny, learned to stain cherry wood with Marco, and managed the scheduling crisis of 2 years ago alongside them. They did not see the community relations director. They saw Madeline. It was Marco who tipped me off first. He was the shift foreman for the finishing department, a man with hands permanently stained the color of walnut. I found him staring at a pallet of unboxed cabinet doors. Shaking his head. "Problem?" I asked. Stopping beside him, He jumped, then relaxed when he saw it was me. Hey, Maddie. Yeah, big problem. Look at this grain. He ran a rough hand over the wood. It was oak, but it was knotty and green. It had not been kiln-dried properly. You could feel the moisture still trapped inside. This is garbage, he said, keeping his voice low. If we stain this, it will warp in 6 months. The client will be calling for a refund before the check clears. Where did this come from? I asked. We always buy our oak from Miller Brothers. Not anymore, Marco said. New directive from upstairs. We switched to a distributor out of state. Global sourcing partners. I looked at the shipping manifest stapled to the side of the crate. Global sourcing partners. The address was a P.O. box in Delaware. Why switch? Miller Brothers gives us a 15% loyalty discount. Cost cutting, Marco said with a snort. They say this stuff is 20% cheaper on the front end. But Maddie, the waste rate is 40% higher. We are throwing away half the wood. And the lead time? This order is 3 weeks late. I made a note on my clipboard, pretending it was for a newsletter story. So we are late on orders? We are bleeding, Marco whispered. We missed 3 install dates last week. The customers are screaming. And you know what the new operations guy said? He said it was legacy inefficiency. He blamed the machines. He blamed the guys. He looked at me, his eyes angry. We are working overtime to fix this junk wood, and they are telling us we are the problem. I patted his arm. I hear you, Marco. Just keep doing your best. Do not let the quality slide. I walked back to my office, my heart rate climbing. I sat at my desk and pulled out my notebook. Premise: the company is in financial trouble, so they are cutting costs. Observation: they are switching to a cheaper, inferior supplier. Result: higher waste, delayed orders, angry customers. Narrative: the delays are being blamed on the legacy workforce and equipment, not the bad materials. It did not make sense. If you wanted to save a company, you did not destroy your reputation for quality. You did not alienate your oldest customers, unless you did not want to save the company. I waited until 5 o'clock. When the administrative staff went home, I made my way to Nora Klein's office. Nora was still there. Of course, she was always there. She looked up when I entered, her face drawn. She looked 10 years older than she had a month ago. Close the door, she said. I clicked the lock shut. What is going on with the lumber? Nora? I asked, sitting in the chair opposite her. Marco says we are buying trash. Nora took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. I fought it, Madeline. I showed them the numbers. I showed them the long-term cost of warranty repairs. Mr. Sterling, that man from Calder Group. He just smiled. He said we needed to improve short-term liquidity. Liquidity? I asked. By buying bad wood? That destroys liquidity because clients stop paying. Nora opened her bottom drawer. She pulled out a folder, hesitated, and then slid it across the desk to me. I should not be showing you this, she said. I signed an NDA, but I cannot watch them do this to your grandfather's company. I opened the folder. It was a consulting agreement between Ward and Finch Kitchens and Calder Group Advisors. I scanned the legalese. It was standard predatory consulting, monthly retainers that cost more than our entire marketing budget, hourly rates for senior advisors that would make a lawyer blush. But then I saw the clause on page 12. Success fee structure. My finger traced the line. In the event of a refinancing event, consultant shall receive 2% of the total facility value. In the event of an asset liquidation event or sale of majority control, consultant shall receive 5% of the gross transaction value. I looked up at Nora. There is no success fee for profitability. I said, read the next paragraph. She said, performance benchmarks regarding operational efficiency shall be determined solely by the consultant. They are rigging the game. I said, my voice cold. They create the inefficiency by forcing us to buy bad materials. Then they blame the inefficiency on the legacy structure. Then they recommend a sale or liquidation to stop the bleeding, and when the company is sold for parts, they get 5% of the carcass. And your father signed it. Nora said softly, I stared at the signature at the bottom of the page. Grant Ward. The ink looked shaky. When was this signed? I asked. I looked at the date. May 12th. I froze. May 12th. That was a Saturday. I remembered that weekend clearly. I had called home to finalize the details for my graduation dinner. I had called 3 times. No one answered. Finally, my mother had texted me late Sunday night. So sorry. Darling, we missed your call. Dad and I were having a quiet weekend at the lake. No cell service. They were not at the lake. They were here, or at the house, with the Calder group. Signing the death warrant of the family business while I was buying a dress for the ceremony they would eventually ruin. Can I keep a copy of this? I asked. Nora shook her head. If that leaves the building, I lose my pension. They will fire me for cause. I pulled out my phone. I am not taking the paper. I said. I snapped 3 high-resolution photos of the contract, focusing on the signature page and the success fee clause. Delete them if you get caught. Nora whispered. I stood up and put my phone in my pocket. I will not get caught, I said. The next morning, I requested a meeting with my father. His secretary, a new hire named Jessica who treated me like a persistent solicitor, told me he was in conference. I walked past her desk and opened his door. Grant Ward was sitting alone, staring out the window at the parking lot. He jumped when I entered. Madeline, he said, swiveling his chair. You need to make an appointment. Jessica has instructions. I am not a vendor. Dad, I said, closing the door. I am the director of community relations, and I am a shareholder. He sighed, rubbing his temples. What is it? Do you need a budget for the summer picnic? I need the minutes. I said. He blinked. The what? The minutes from the board meeting on May 12th. I said, the meeting where you approved the transfer of the CEO title to Elise and signed the consulting agreement with Calder Group. He stiffened. His eyes darted to the left, a tell he had never been able to master. There was no board meeting on May 12th, he said. Dad, you transferred control of the company. You restructured the debt. You hired an outside firm that is stripping our assets. By law. That requires a board vote. It was a family decision, he snapped, slamming his hand on the desk. Since when do we need a stenographer to talk to our own children? Since you incorporated, I said calmly, we are not a lemonade stand. We are a corporation. There are laws. I am the majority shareholder, he shouted. My vote is the only one that counts. That is not how it works. I said, I have an interest. Elise has an interest. The trust has an interest. If you made these decisions without a formal meeting, without minutes, without proper notice, then the contracts might be voidable. He stood up, his face reddening. Are you threatening me? He asked. Your own father? I am trying to save you, I countered, my voice rising for the first time. Can't you see what they are doing? They are tanking the production line. They are loading us with debt. They are setting us up for a sale. Dad, they are saving us, he roared. You don't know the whole picture. Madeline, you were away. Then show me the picture, I yelled back. Show me the books. Show me why you did this. He collapsed back into his chair, suddenly looking very small and very old. He covered his face with his hands. I can't, he whispered. It is complicated. Why? I asked, stepping closer. Why is it complicated? Just go do your job. Madeline, he said, his voice muffled by his hands. Please, just plan the picnic. I stared at him for a long moment. He was broken. Whatever leverage they had on him, whatever fear was driving him, it was stronger than his love for the business, stronger than his love for me. I walked out. I found Elise in the break room later that afternoon. She was staring at the vending machine, clutching a bag of pretzels she hadn't opened. Elise? I said. She turned. Her eyes were bloodshot. She had lost weight in the last 2 weeks. Her blazer hung off her shoulders. I can't do it, Maddie, she whispered. I can't do it. Come with me, I said. I took her to my car. We sat in the parking lot with the air conditioning blasting. Talk to me. I said, he wakes up screaming. She said, who? Dad? Elise nodded. She was picking at the foil bag of pretzels, shredding the edge. I stayed at the house last weekend. Mom asked me to. She is worried about him. He walks the halls at night. He talks to himself. What does he say? He keeps saying the letter, Elise said, and what Dad wrote, over and over. I should have burned what Dad wrote. My grandfather, I said. Elise nodded, and he is terrified of the mailbox. Maddie, every time the mail comes, he runs to get it before Mom sees it. But Mom, she just watches him. She looks so angry. I felt a chill. Elise, listen to me. Did Dad ever mention a specific letter? Maybe something from Grandpa's estate? She shook her head. No, just, he says Silas knew. That's it. Silas knew and he wrote it down. I drove Elise back to her apartment and told her to call in sick the next day. She needed sleep. I needed answers. Silas knew. He wrote it down. I drove out of town, heading west toward the river. The suburbs gave way to farmland, and then to the quiet, tree-lined streets of the retirement community where Hugh Lennox lived. Hugh had been my grandfather's best friend. They had framed houses together in the 70s. Hugh was 88 now, sharp as a tack, but confined to a wheelchair. He was sitting on the porch of the facility, watching the birds at a feeder. Maddie Ward, he said as I walked up the steps. I heard you were back. I expected a visit sooner. I smiled, sitting on the bench beside him. I have been a little busy. Hugh, getting settled. He looked at me with shrewd, watery blue eyes. I heard about the party, he said, and the sister? Doesn't make a lick of sense. No, it doesn't. I agreed. Your grandpa would be spinning in his grave, Hugh said. He leaned back, looking at the sky. He always said Elise was a sweet girl, but she had hands for painting, not for holding a hammer. And me? I asked. What did he say about me? Hugh chuckled. He said you were a pain in the ass. He said, I laughed, despite the tension in my chest. He said you asked too many questions. Hugh continued. Said you had to know how everything worked, why the plumbing went this way, why the load-bearing wall was there. He said you had the steadiest judgment of the lot. Did he? I asked softly. Hugh nodded. He told me. Right before he passed. He said, Hugh, I am worried about Grant. He is a good builder, but he has a soft spine. He lets people push him, but Maddie is concrete. She sets hard. I felt tears pricking my eyes. He said he was going to fix it. Hugh added, Fix what? The succession. Hugh said, he said he was going to put it in writing, make sure the business didn't get squandered. Said he wrote a letter to be opened when you were ready. I leaned forward. Hugh, do you know where that letter is? He shook his head. He kept it in his desk, I think, or maybe with his lawyer, old Abernathy. Abernathy. I said, that was the connection. I left Hugh and drove straight to the office of Abernathy Sons. It was a small brownstone near the courthouse. The receptionist told me Mr. Abernathy had retired abruptly 3 months ago. Retired? I asked. He is only 65. Health reasons, she said vaguely. I asked who was handling the Ward and Finch files. Oh, those were transferred. She said, we received a request to move all files to Harrow and Bristow. Did Mr. Abernathy recommend Harrow and Bristow? I asked. She hesitated. No, actually there was a bit of a conflict. Mr. Abernathy refused to sign off on something. I don't know the details. But the next day, we got the transfer order signed by your father. Thank you. I said. I went home to my apartment. It was dark now. I made a pot of coffee and opened my laptop. I needed to find the cracks in the paperwork. If they had rushed this, if they had fired the old lawyer and brought in a fixer firm, they would have made mistakes. I pulled up the Ohio Secretary of State's business search. I pulled the filings for Ward and Finch Kitchens, LLC. I found the certificate of amendment filed 3 weeks ago, changing the manager structure. I scanned the document. It was signed by Cynthia Ward as secretary. I looked closer. The address for the new registered agent, Harrow and Bristow, was listed as 1400 Market Street, Suite 300. I opened a new tab and searched the address. 1400 Market Street was a WeWork co-working space in Columbus, a prestigious law firm operating out of a shared workspace. I dug deeper. I looked at the filing for the secured transaction, the lien the bank had filed against our equipment. It listed the debtor as Ward Finch Kitchens. They had typoed the name. A capital I in Finch. It was a small error, but lawyers who charge $500 an hour do not make typos in the debtor's name on a UCC filing. Unless they are rushing, unless they are drafting the documents at 2 a.m. because someone is screaming at them to get it done. I looked at the filing for the Calder Group. Their business address on the consulting contract was in Chicago, but on the state registration, their principal office was listed in a residential neighborhood in Florida. I zoomed in on the street view. It was a strip mall next to a dry cleaner. This wasn't a strategic partnership. This was a grift. My father had been panicked. He had been convinced, by someone, that the company was in mortal danger. He had fired his trusted lawyer because the lawyer wouldn't play along. He had hired a storefront firm to rush the paperwork, and he had signed a contract with a consultant that was stripping the company for parts. And the reason? The letter. Grandfather had left a letter giving me the company, or at least a controlling interest. My parents had found it, or knew about it, and they had buried it. But burying it wasn't enough. They had to make sure I couldn't claim it. They had to restructure the company so that even if I found the letter, the company would be so fundamentally changed, so debt-ridden and legally entangled, that I couldn't save it. Or maybe the trouble my mother spoke of was the leverage. Maybe they had done something years ago, something illegal, and the Calder Group had found out. I sat back, the light of the screen illuminating the dark room. My attorney, Tessa, had told me to be the Trojan horse, to be quiet, to wait. But waiting was dangerous. Every day we waited. They bought more bad wood. Every day. They pushed the company closer to the liquidation event that would trigger their payout. I needed to stop the bleeding. I opened my email client. I composed a new message to Tessa Marlowe. Subject: Section 220. Demand: Tessa, we are not waiting. I have evidence of fiduciary breaches, conflicts of interest, and asset stripping. The strategic partner has a contract that incentivizes bankruptcy. The board minutes for the restructuring do not exist. Draft the demand. I want the general ledger. I want the full loan agreements. I want the correspondence between Grant Ward and the Calder Group, and I want the complete file transferred from Abernathy. Send it tomorrow. Madeline. I hit send. My hand was trembling. Just a little. I was declaring war. I was suing my own father. I was blowing up the family. But as I looked at the picture of the growth poster I had taken on my phone, that soulless, corporate lie hanging in my grandfather's office, I knew I had no choice. They had already blown up the family. I was just the one walking through the rubble, trying to find the foundation. The legal demand landed on a Tuesday morning. By noon, my phone was vibrating across the surface of my desk like a trapped insect. It was my mother. I watched the screen light up, buzz, and go dark. Then it lit up again. I did not answer. I was in a meeting with the warehouse manager regarding the new inventory protocols, or at least, that was the excuse I gave myself. The truth was that I needed them to sweat. I needed the reality of the situation, that I was not just a disappointed daughter, but a litigant, to settle into the drywall of their house. When I finally drove out to the family estate that evening, the atmosphere was not one of anger. It was one of siege. The house, a sprawling Victorian on the hill overlooking the river, was dark except for the kitchen. I let myself in through the side door. My mother, Cynthia, was standing at the granite island, aggressively chopping vegetables. She was not cooking dinner. She was destroying celery. My father was sitting at the breakfast table, staring into a mug of tea that had long since gone cold. He looked gray. "You?" my mother said without turning around. Her voice was a wire pulled so tight it hummed. "Hello, Mom, Dad, how dare you?" She turned then, the knife still in her hand. It was a chef's knife, gleaming under the pot lights. "How dare you send that demand to your father? Do you have any idea what you have done? I requested documents. I said, placing my keys on the counter. Documents that, as a shareholder, I am entitled to see. If there is nothing to hide, it should take 10 minutes to email them. You are trying to destroy this family, she shouted. The composure she had worn at the gala, the mask of the gracious matriarch, was gone. Her face was blotchy. You are jealous. Madeline, you are petty. You couldn't handle that we chose Elise. So now you want to burn the house down around us. I am trying to save the house, I said, keeping my voice level. I know about the credit line. Mom, I know about the collateral. I know about the consulting fees. Stop it! She screamed. She slammed the knife down on the cutting board. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. You don't know anything. You were away. You were playing student while we were keeping this family afloat. I looked at my father. He hadn't moved. He hadn't blinked. Dad? I said. He looked up slowly. His eyes were red-rimmed, heavy with a kind of exhaustion that sleep couldn't fix. You have to stop. Maddie, he whispered. Tell me why. I said, tell me why you signed a contract that gives 5% of our assets to a consultant if we fail. Tell me why you fired Abernathy. Please, he said. He sounded like a child. If you push this, if you keep digging, people will get hurt. The phrasing chilled me. He didn't say we will lose money. He didn't say the business will suffer. He said people will get hurt. Who will get hurt? Dad? I asked. He looked at the window, where the darkness pressed against the glass. Just drop the demand, he said. Take the community relations job. Be happy, please, before it is too late. My mother stepped between us. Get out, she hissed. If you are going to act like a lawyer, you can talk to our lawyers. Do not come back here until you are ready to be a daughter again. I looked at them, my mother fueled by rage. My father hollowed out by fear. They were terrified, and for the first time, I realized they weren't just protecting their pride. They were protecting a secret that they believed would destroy them. I left the house. I did not sleep that night. 2 days later, the response from Harrow and Bristow arrived. It came via secure courier to Tessa Marlowe's office. I drove into the city to review it with her. Tessa spread the documents out on her conference table. There were hundreds of pages. This is a joke, Tessa said, flipping through a binder. I looked over her shoulder. The pages were black. They had produced the board minutes, technically, but every substantive line, every discussion of strategy, every financial figure, every vote count was redacted. Black bars crossed the paper like scars. Look at this, Tessa said, pointing to a document labeled May 12th Special Meeting. They redacted the attendees. They redacted the location. They even redacted the time. Can they do that? I asked. Not legally, she said. You can redact for attorney-client privilege or trade secrets, but they have redacted the basic mechanics of corporate governance. This isn't a legal response. Madeline, this is a stalling tactic. They are buying time. Time for what? To close whatever deal they are working on, she said, or to clean up the crime scene. She handed me a stack of financial summaries. They gave us the high-level profit and loss statements, she said. But look at the expense categories. I scanned the columns. Consulting fees, $120,000. Miscellaneous administrative, $85,000. Restructuring costs, $50,000. This is for 1 month? I asked. Tessa nodded. They are bleeding cash. And look at the revenue. It is down 30%. That doesn't make sense. I said, we have a backlog of orders. We should be up. Unless they are deferring revenue, Tessa suggested, or recognizing it differently. Madeline, if I didn't know better, I would say they are trying to make the company look insolvent. I thought of the success fee in the Calder Group contract. If they trigger a liquidation event, I said, the consultants get paid. If the company looks worthless, they can sell it cheap to a rescue buyer. And who is the buyer? Tessa asked. I bet I know. I said, I went back to the office the next day with a singular focus. I needed to find Simon Vale. Simon was the controller. He was a man who wore suspenders and brought a ham sandwich to work every day for 20 years. He was meticulous, boring, and honest, or at least, he used to be. I waited until the Calder Group representatives, two young men in slim-fit suits who spent their day looking at spreadsheets on iPads, left for lunch. I walked into Simon's office and closed the door. Simon looked up from his computer. He looked like he was about to cry. "Madeline," he said, "I am busy. I know you are busy." "Simon," I said, sitting down. "I saw the financials Harrow and Bristow sent over." He flinched. "I didn't send those." He said quickly, "They took the files. They did the redactions." "I know." I said, "But I saw the raw numbers, the consulting fees, the miscellaneous costs." Simon took off his glasses and cleaned them on his tie. His hands were shaking. "It is not my doing," he whispered. "I know about the reclassification." "Simon," I lied. I kept my voice gentle. "I know they are asking you to move capital expenditures into operating expenses. I know they are asking you to book revenue late." He stopped cleaning his glasses. He looked at me, his eyes wide. "How did you know?" he breathed. "Because that is how you tank a balance sheet," I said. Simon put his head in his hands. "They stand over me. Madeline, Mr. Sterling, he stands right there. He tells me, 'This isn't an asset improvement. Simon, this is a repair. Expense it,' he tells me. 'Don't book that deposit yet. Wait until the install is complete. That is against GAAP. I said, "That is fraud." He calls it conservative accounting, Simon said miserably. He says we need to show the true risk profile of the business to the bank. But it makes us look like we are drowning. We are profitable. Madeline, if you take away their fees and the weird accounting, we are up 6% this quarter." I reached across the desk and touched his hand. "Simon, listen to me. If you sign those financial statements knowing they are misleading, you are liable. When the bank finds out, and they will find out, you are the one who goes to jail. Not Sterling. You." He looked up, terrified. "What do I do?" he asked. "I have a mortgage. I have 2 kids in college." "You document it." I said, "You keep a separate set of books, the real books. Can you do that?" He nodded slowly. "I have been." He confessed, "On a flash drive, just in case." "Good man." I said, "Keep doing it. And Simon, if Sterling asks you to do something that feels wrong, ask him to put it in an email. He never puts it in an email." Simon said, "He only talks." "Then write him an email confirming the conversation." I said, "Dear Mr. Sterling, per our discussion, I am reclassifying this expense as requested. Create a paper trail." I left Simon's office feeling a strange mix of vindication and horror. My parents weren't just being taken advantage of. They were actively participating in the dismantling of their own legacy. And for what? I found Elise in the showroom. She was rearranging samples, moving the quartz squares from one side of the display to the other. It was busy work. "Elise," I said. She jumped. She always jumped now. "Mom called me. She said immediately. She said you are trying to sue us. She said you are ungrateful. I am not trying to sue you." I said, "I am trying to stop Dad from selling the company for scrap parts." "He is not selling it," Elise insisted. She looked frantic. "He is saving it." "From what?" I asked. "From the past," she cried out. The showroom went quiet. A couple browsing for a vanity looked over at us. I grabbed Elise's arm and pulled her into the mock pantry. "What past?" "Elise?" She was breathing hard, hyperventilating. Mom told me. She whispered, "She told me why they couldn't give it to you." "Why?" I asked. "Because you are too independent," she said. She repeated the words my mother had used. She said, "Madeline is a bulldog. If we let her in, she will dig. She will ask the wrong questions. She will find the bodies." "The bodies?" It is a figure of speech. "Maddie," Elise said, tears running down her face, but she meant it. She said they needed someone who would trust them, someone who would just sign the papers and not look at the fine print. That is why they picked me. Because I am weak. No, I said fiercely. Because you are loyal, and they exploited that. Elise wiped her face. I hate them for it, she whispered. I hate that they made me the boss just so they could control me. Then help me. I said, I can't. She said, I signed the papers. You can tell me about the letter. I said, the one Grandpa wrote. I don't know where it is, she said. But I knew someone who might. I waited until the end of the shift. I went to the loading dock. I was looking for Kenny, the custodian, but he had left for the day. Instead, I found a young guy named Marcus who worked in the warehouse. Marcus. I said, can I ask you something? Sure. Madeline, Kenny told me some files were moved a few weeks ago. Old files. Yeah, Marcus said. The lawyers took them. Did they take everything? Everything in the boxes, Marcus said. But that was weird. What was weird? A couple nights before the lawyers came. Marcus said, leaning on a pallet jack, I was working late. Inventory. I saw your mom in the copy room. My mom? I asked. Cynthia never went to the copy room. Yeah. She was scanning something. But not a file. It looked like, I don't know, an envelope? A thick one. She had to press the lid down hard to get it to close. Did she shred it? I asked. My heart was pounding. Marcus shook his head. No. She put it back in her purse. But she scanned it. I saw the flash. It existed. My grandfather's letter. The insurance. My mother hadn't destroyed it. She had digitized it. Why? Because you don't destroy leverage unless you have to. Or maybe she couldn't bring herself to burn her father's last words. Even if she defied them, if she scanned it, it was on the server, or it was on her email. But I didn't have access. I needed to go to the source. I drove to my parents' house again. This time, I didn't go to the door. I waited in the driveway. My father came out at 9 o'clock. He was carrying a trash bag. He walked to the bins at the end of the drive. He moved slowly, like an old man. Dad, I said, stepping out of the shadows. He dropped the bag. Jesus, Madeline, you scared me. We need to talk. Dad, not shouting, just talking. I have nothing to say to you, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. I know about the settlement, I said. It was a bluff, a calculated guess based on people will get hurt and legacy agreement. He froze. What? I know you used company money to pay someone off. I said, years ago. I know that is what Calder is holding over you. He stared at me, in the moonlight. His face was a mask of tragedy. You can't know that, he whispered. No one knows that. Grandpa knew. I said, that is what was in the letter, wasn't it? He slumped against the side of the garage. He slid down until he was sitting on the pavement. It was 1998. He said, his voice was so quiet, I had to kneel to hear him. Tell me, I said. We had a partner. He said, before your time, a silent partner. A guy named Miller. He claimed he owned 30% of the business. He had a piece of paper from your grandfather, from the early days, a napkin deal, and he came for it when we started making real money. Dad said he wanted a payout, $1 million. We didn't have $1 million cash, not personally, so you took it from the company. I said. Grant nodded. I cooked the books. I listed it as a capital expansion. I paid him off. It was the only way to save the business. Madeline, if he had sued, he would have taken everything. But that is embezzlement, I said softly. I intended to pay it back, he pleaded. And I did. Over 10 years. I put it back, every cent. The company never suffered. But the crime remains. I said, yes. He said, and the Calder Group. They found the old ledger, the one from 98. It was in the boxes, and now they own you. I said, they said it was a governance irregularity, Dad said bitterly. They said if I didn't cooperate, if I didn't bring them in to modernize the company, they would have a fiduciary duty to report the historical fraud to the bank, to the authorities, and if they report it, the bank calls the loans. Dad said, I go to prison. Your mother loses the house. The company dissolves. So you let them strip it instead. I said, you let them charge huge fees and drive us into debt so they can sell it and take their cut. You are letting them kill the patient to save the doctor. I had no choice. He wept. They promised they would save it. They said they just needed to restructure. They are lying. Dad, I said, they are vultures. They found a wound, and they are feeding on it. He looked at me, tears streaming down his face. I am so sorry. Maddie, that is why it couldn't be you. You would have seen the 98 ledger. You would have asked. So you gave it to Elise to protect me? Or to protect yourself? Both, he whispered. I stood up. My knees cracked. Where is the letter? Dad? Grandpa's letter. He closed his eyes. Your mother has it. In her safe. She thinks it protects us. It proves that Grandpa knew about Miller, that he authorized the deal. Does it? No, Dad said. It says the opposite. It says, Grant, do not pay him, fight him. Truth is better than a bribe. I felt a wave of profound sadness for my grandfather. He had known his son was weak. He had tried to warn him. I reached down and helped my father stand up. Go inside. Dad, what are you going to do? He asked, gripping my arm. You can't tell them. They will ruin us. I am not going to tell them. I said, I am going to beat them. I drove home. I called Tessa. It was 11 o'clock at night. I have the motive. I said, tell me. She said, historical embezzlement. My father used company funds to settle a partnership dispute in the 90s. Calder found the proof. They are blackmailing him into the consulting agreement and the asset strip. Tessa let out a low whistle. That is ugly. Madeline, if this comes out... I know, I said. My father goes to jail. So what is the play? She asked. If we sue, it comes out in discovery. If we do nothing, the company dies. We need a third option. I said, we need to force them to walk away. How? They have the leverage. We have the sunlight, I said. They rely on secrecy. They rely on my father being too scared to speak. They rely on there being no minutes, no record, no witnesses. So I am calling a meeting. I said, a real one. I pulled out the company bylaws I had memorized. Article 4, Section 2. A special meeting of the shareholders may be called by holders of not less than 10% of all shares entitled to vote. I hold 10%. I said, I am calling a special meeting of the board and shareholders. When? Next Friday? I said, and who are you inviting? Tessa asked. Everyone. I said, I am inviting the bank. I am inviting the senior staff. I am inviting the Calder Group. I am inviting Harrow and Bristow. If you do that, Tessa warned, you are locking everyone in a room with a live grenade. Exactly, I said, and I am the only one who knows how to pull the pin. Draft the notice. Tessa, make it formal. Agenda. Review of financial performance and governance matters. I hung up the phone. I walked to my window and looked out at the streetlights of Briar Glen. My father had spent 20 years paying for a mistake because he was afraid of the truth. He had let fear rule him. I wasn't afraid. I would convene the meeting. I would put the numbers on the screen. I would force the strategic partners to explain their fees in front of the banker who held the mortgage. I would force my sister to speak. And if I had to, I would reveal the secret myself. I would rather see my father face the consequences of his own actions than watch him sacrifice the livelihood of 50 families to save his own skin. I went to my desk and opened my laptop. I started typing the presentation. Slide 1. Ward Finch Kitchens. Current financial status. Slide 2. The cost of strategy. I was done being the community relations director. I was the daughter of Silas Ward, and I was coming for his company. The notice for the special meeting of shareholders sat on the desk in my small, windowless office. It was a single sheet of cream-colored paper, formally typed, announcing the date and time. Friday, June 28th, at 9 in the morning. It looked like a wedding invitation. It felt like a subpoena. In the week since I had sent the demand, the atmosphere at Ward and Finch had shifted from tense to suffocating. The air in the showroom was thick with whispered conversations that stopped the moment I walked into a room. My father, Grant, had stopped coming in entirely, claiming a summer cold. Elise was a ghost, flitting between her office and the bathroom, her eyes permanently red-rimmed. But the silence from the house on the hill was the loudest thing of all. Then, 3 days before the meeting, the silence broke. I was at my apartment, reviewing a stack of invoices on my kitchen counter. It was 8 in the evening. Thunder was rumbling in the distance, threatening one of those heavy, humid Ohio storms that turn the sky green. There was a knock at the door. I knew who it was before I opened it. My mother had a specific knock. 3 sharp raps, a pause, and then 2 more. It was the knock of a woman who expected to be let in immediately. I opened the door. Cynthia Ward stood there, clutching a Tupperware container and wearing a raincoat that cost more than my first car. "Madeline," she said. She held up the container. "I made lasagna. I know you never cook for yourself." I stared at her. We were in the middle of a corporate standoff, and she was bringing me pasta. "Come in, Mom," I said, stepping aside. She walked in, her heels clicking on the hardwood. She surveyed my apartment with a critical eye, noting the lack of curtains and the books stacked on the floor. She placed the lasagna on the counter, right on top of a spreadsheet I had printed out. "It is cozy," she said, forcing a smile. "A bit small, but cozy. What do you want?" "Mom?" I asked. I was too tired for the dance. She unbuttoned her coat, but did not take it off. She turned to me, clasping her hands in front of her. "I want you to be happy, Madeline. That is all I have ever wanted." I leaned against the refrigerator, crossing my arms. "I am not unhappy. Mom, I am determined. There is a difference." She sighed, a dramatic exhalation that shook her shoulders. "Your father is sick," she said. "This stress, it is killing him. His blood pressure is through the roof. He cannot sleep. He wanders the house at night, talking to himself. Then tell him to cancel the contract." I said, "Tell him to fire the Calder Group and open the books. The stress goes away the minute he tells the truth." "It is not that simple," she snapped, her voice rising. "It is never that simple. You think business is just black and white numbers, but it is not. It is relationships. It is promises." She reached into her oversized purse. For a second, I thought she was going to pull out a weapon. Instead, she pulled out a thick blue folder. She placed it on the counter next to the lasagna. "We want to make you an offer," she said. I looked at the folder. "What is this?" "A settlement," she said. She smoothed the cover with her hand. "It is a generous package. Madeline, an executive salary, full benefits, a title of your choosing, vice president of strategy, if you like, and a lump sum payment of $200,000. I stared at the blue folder. $200,000. It was a lot of money. It was enough to pay off my student loans and put a down payment on a house. "And in exchange?" I asked. She opened the folder to the last page. "You withdraw your request for the special meeting," she said. "You resign from the board. And you sign this." She tapped a document titled Non-Disclosure and Non-Disparagement Agreement. I read the first paragraph. It was sweeping. It barred me from discussing the company's finances, operations, or history with anyone. It barred me from contacting the bank. It barred me from ever speaking about the events of the last 6 months. It was a gag order. "This is a bribe." "Mom," I said quietly, "it is security," she insisted. "You can go to Chicago. You can start your own firm. You can travel. You are better when you are away." Madeline, we all know that. There it was again, that phrase, "You are better when you are away." I looked at her. Her face was desperate, the makeup settling into the fine lines around her mouth. She was terrified. She was trying to buy her daughter off because she believed the alternative was total destruction. I closed the folder and slid it back toward her. "No," I said. "Madeline, be reasonable." "I am being reasonable," I said. "I am declining a bribe to cover up a crime." "It is not a crime," she shrieked. It is survival. I walked over to her. I kept my hands at my sides. Listen to me, Mom. I do not want your money. I do not want a fake title. And I am not going to Chicago. Then what do you want? She cried. Do you want to see your father in handcuffs? Is that it? Do you want to see us on the street? I want the truth. I said. I took a breath. Here is my counteroffer. Mom, no money, no NDA. We hold the meeting on Friday. Dad tells the bank the truth about the consulting fees. We fire the Calder Group. We restructure the debt honestly. And if there is a penalty, if there is a lawsuit from the past, we face it together, as a family. She stared at me as if I were speaking a foreign language. The idea of facing a problem rather than hiding it seemed utterly alien to her. You are naive, she whispered. You have no idea what these people are capable of. The Calder Group. They are not just consultants. They are sharks. If we try to fire them, they will eat us alive. Then let them try. I said, but I am not signing that paper. She snatched the folder off the counter. Her face hardened into a mask of cold fury. You are just like him, she spat. Like Dad? I asked. No, she said. Like your grandfather. You think you are so righteous. You think you are the only one who knows right from wrong. But you are going to destroy us all. She turned and marched out of the apartment. She left the lasagna. I threw it in the trash. The next morning, the war escalated. I arrived at my office to find an email from Harrow and Bristow. It was not a settlement offer. It was a cease and desist letter. To Ms. Madeline Ward, it has come to our attention that you are contacting vendors, employees, and financial partners of Ward and Finch Kitchens in a manner that constitutes tortious interference with business relations. Your unauthorized investigation is disrupting operations and causing material harm to the company. You are hereby ordered to cease all such activities immediately. Failure to comply will result in a motion for injunctive relief. I read it twice. They were threatening to sue me for doing my job as a shareholder. I called Tessa Marlowe. Ignore it, Tessa said. Her voice was tinny through the speakerphone. It is a scare tactic. You have a statutory right to investigate. They know that. They are just trying to rattle you before Friday. It is working, I admitted. My hands were shaking. Don't let it, Tessa said. How are the numbers coming? Simon and I are almost done. I said, focus on that, she said. The truth is in the ledger. I hung up and went to find Simon Vale. We had set up a war room in the basement archives, a place where the Wi-Fi was spotty and no one ever came. Simon had brought his laptop and a thermos of coffee. He looked like a man who had not slept in a week, but there was a new glint in his eye. It was the defiance of the bureaucrat who had finally had enough. I think I have it. Madeline, he said as I sat down. Show me, I said. He turned the laptop toward me. I took the last 12 months of data, he explained. I stripped out the Calder Group retainer fees. I stripped out the consulting expenses. I removed the cost variance from the new lumber supplier and plugged in the old Miller Brothers pricing. And I reversed the revenue deferrals they forced me to book. And? I asked. He pressed a key. A graph appeared on the screen. The line was green. It was pointing up. We are not distressed, Simon said, his voice trembling with emotion. We are up. Net profit is up. 8% year over year. The cash flow is healthy. I stared at the screen. The relief was so intense it made me dizzy. They manufactured it. I said, every bit of it. Simon agreed. They loaded us with unnecessary costs to create a liquidity crisis. They delayed the revenue to make the quarter look bad. It is a classic distress-to-buy scheme. Make the company look like it is dying, then buy it for pennies on the dollar to save it. Can we prove this on Friday? I asked. Simon nodded. I have the invoices. I have the emails where Sterling told me to hold the checks. I have the side-by-side comparison. Print it. I said, print everything. Make 5 copies. As Simon worked, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Elise. Roof. Now, please. I ran up the back stairs to the roof access door. The roof of the factory was flat, covered in gravel and humming with the sound of the HV AC units. It was where we used to come as teenagers to smoke cigarettes we stole from Dad's coat pocket. Elise was standing by the edge, looking out over the river. The wind was whipping her hair around her face. I thought she might jump. "Elise!" I called out. She turned. She looked terrified. "They are here," she said. "Who?" "Mr. Sterling and a lawyer. They are in Dad's office. They want me to sign an amendment." "What kind of amendment?" I asked, walking toward her slowly. "A general security agreement," she said. She was shivering, even though it was 80 degrees. "They said the bank is getting nervous because of your demand letter. They said we need to secure the consulting fees against the inventory." I grabbed her shoulders. "Elise, listen to me. A general security agreement means they can put a lien on every piece of wood, every saw, every finished cabinet in this building. If you sign that, and we miss one payment, they can take the inventory, they can lock the doors." "I know," she sobbed. "I know. I tried to tell them I needed to read it. They said there is no time. They said if I don't sign it by 5 o'clock, the Calder Group will walk away and the bank will call the loan. They are lying." I said, "The bank won't call the loan because of a demand letter. The bank wants stability." She looked at me, her eyes wide and pleading. "I am hiding. Maddie, I told them I had a stomach ache. I ran away. I am the CEO and I am hiding on the roof. You are doing great." I said, "Just keep hiding. Do not sign anything. I can't go back down there." She said, "Then don't." I said, "Give me your badge. Go down the fire escape. Go to my apartment. Wait there until I come home." She fumbled for her lanyard and handed it to me. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I'm going to buy us some time," I said. I watched her climb down the metal stairs. Then I took a deep breath, smoothed my blazer, and went downstairs to my father's office. Mr. Sterling was sitting behind my father's desk. He was a man of indeterminate age, with skin that looked like it had been tanned in a salon and teeth that were too white. He was looking at his phone. The lawyer from Harrow and Bristow sat in the guest chair. "Where is she?" Sterling asked without looking up. "She is indisposed," I said, stepping into the room. "I am Madeline Ward. I don't believe we have been formally introduced." Sterling looked up. His eyes were cold. "Dead sharks. The sister," he said, "the community relations girl, and the shareholder." I corrected. "And the one who knows that you are trying to force a lien on a company that doesn't need one." Sterling smiled. It was not a nice smile. "We are trying to protect our investment. Ms. Ward, your family owes us a great deal of money. You have billed us a great deal of money," I said, "for advice that has actively damaged our supply chain and our reputation. That is not a debt. That is malpractice." He stood up. He was tall, looming over the desk. "You are playing a dangerous game, little girl. You think you found some accounting errors. What you found is the tip of an iceberg that will sink this entire town if you keep chipping at it." "Is that the threat?" I asked. "The legacy agreement? The payment from 1998? His smile vanished. "I see your father has been talking," he said quietly. "He didn't have to." I said, "You people leave a trail of slime wherever you go." I leaned forward, placing my hands on the desk. "Elise is not coming back. She is not signing your amendment. And on Friday morning, at 9 o'clock, I am going to show the bank exactly what you have been doing." Sterling laughed. It was a dry, dismissive sound. "Good luck with that," he said. "By Friday. You won't have a company to save." He signaled to the lawyer. They gathered their briefcases and walked out. I stood in the silence of the office. My legs felt like jelly. I needed to talk to my father, really talk to him. I found him at the house that night. My mother had gone to her bridge club, a surreal attempt at normalcy in the middle of a collapse. Dad was in the garage. He was polishing his old truck, a 1972 Ford that he never drove. He was rubbing the wax in circles, over and over, on the same spot. "Dad," I said. He didn't stop rubbing. "They tried to get Elise to sign a lien on the inventory today." I said. He stopped. His shoulders slumped. "I told them not to." He whispered. "I told Sterling it was too much. He doesn't care what you think." "Dad," I said. "He owns you, or he thinks he does." He turned around. He looked like a ghost. "I need to ask you something." I said, The payments, the money you used to pay off Miller, was it just a one-time thing? He looked away, staring at the shelf of oil cans. No, he said softly. Tell me. It wasn't just the settlement. He confessed. Miller. He had a partner, a silent guy. When Miller died, the partner kept coming. He said he had the napkin. He said he would go to the press. So you kept paying? Every month. My father said, for 20 years, $2,000 a month, then 5, then 10. Where did you get the money? I asked. I took it as a consulting fee, he said. I set up a shell company. Apex Advisory. I billed the company, took the cash, and paid the guy. I closed my eyes. It wasn't just the 1998 fraud. It was ongoing. My father had been skimming money from his own company for 2 decades to pay blackmail. That is why you have no cash reserves. I said, that is why you were vulnerable when Calder showed up. Calder bought the debt. My father said, they bought the claim from the guy. They came to me 6 months ago. They showed me the ledger of my payments to Apex. They said, we know this is you, Grant. We can send you to jail for tax evasion and embezzlement, or you can hire us to fix the company. So you hired them. I said, I thought they would help, he cried. They said they would modernize us. They said they would make us so profitable that the money I took wouldn't matter, but instead, they are bleeding you dry to get the assets. I said. He nodded, tears streaming down his face. I just wanted to protect you girls, he sobbed. I didn't want you to know your father was a thief. I walked over and hugged him. He smelled of car wax and fear. You are not a thief. Dad, I whispered, you are a victim, but on Friday, we have to stop being victims. The night before the meeting, I was at my apartment, putting the final touches on the presentation. The slides were stark. Revenue versus adjusted revenue, the cost of Calder, the true profitability of Ward Finch. My mother came back. She didn't knock this time. She used the key she had insisted on keeping for emergencies. I heard the door unlock and looked up. She stood in the doorway. She wasn't carrying food this time. She looked stripped down. Raw. You are really going to do it, she said. Yes, I said. She walked into the room and sat on the edge of my sofa. She looked at the poster on my wall, a vintage print of the Chicago skyline. You know why your grandfather left you the letter, don't you? She asked. To save the company. I said, no. She said. She looked at me with a strange, twisted expression. Because you were his real child. I froze. What? Not biologically? She said quickly, waving her hand. Don't be stupid. You are Grant's daughter. But in spirit? In his heart? You were the one. She picked at a loose thread on the sofa cushion. He looked at Grant, and he saw disappointment. She said, he saw a boy who was too soft, a boy who liked poetry and hated sawdust. But he looked at you, and he saw himself. He saw the steel. She looked up at me, and her eyes were filled with a toxic mix of jealousy and grief. He loved you more. Madeline, he trusted you more. He sat at our dinner table and talked to you about business while your father sat there in silence. Do you have any idea what that does to a man? To see his own father choose his daughter over him? So you hid the letter. I said, to protect Dad's ego? To protect his place, she cried. If Silas had given you the company back then, it would have destroyed Grant. It would have confirmed everything he feared, that he wasn't good enough. So you let him run it into the ground instead. I said, you let him be blackmailed for 20 years. You let him sign a contract with vultures, all to pretend he was the king? We kept the family together, she insisted. We kept the name. You kept a lie. Mom, I said, and the lie has rotted everything it touched. She stood up. She looked small and defeated. If you go into that meeting tomorrow, she said, her voice shaking, you are choosing the dead over the living. You are choosing Silas over us. I am choosing the truth, I said. She looked at me one last time, a long, searching look. Then she turned and walked out. I locked the door behind her. I sat in the silence of my apartment. I thought about my grandfather. I thought about the rough warmth of his hand when he taught me to hold a plane. Steadiest judgment, he had said. I wasn't choosing him over them. I was choosing the only path that let any of us survive. I picked up my phone and called Elise. "Are you ready?" I asked. "No," she whispered. "Good." I said, "Neither am I. I will pick you up at 8. I went to my closet and pulled out my suit. It was a dark navy, sharp and tailored. It was the suit I had worn to my thesis defense. I hung it on the back of the door. Tomorrow, there would be no more shadows, no more community relations, no more whispers about what was meant to be. Tomorrow, the lights would come on, and whatever was hiding in the corners, the fraud, the fear, the shame, would have to stand up and face the room. I turned off the lamp and sat in the dark, watching the storm roll in over Briar Glen. I was ready. The Friday morning of the meeting broke with a sky the color of a bruised peach. The storm had passed, leaving the air in Briar Glen thick and heavy with humidity. I arrived at the showroom at 7 o'clock, 2 hours early. I wore the navy suit I had graduated in, a garment that felt like armor. I checked the projector. I checked the chairs. I checked the microphone. Everything had to be perfect because I was about to dismantle my family's reputation in the very building that had built it, by 8:30. The room was filling up. We had set up rows of folding chairs in the main aisle of the showroom, right between the modern farmhouse display and the Tuscan villa vignette. It was a surreal stage for a corporate execution. The employees stood in the back, a silent wall of flannel and denim. I saw Kenny, the custodian, leaning on his mop bucket. I saw Marco, the finishing foreman, his arms crossed over his chest, looking grim. They knew something was happening. In a small town, secrets have a way of leaking into the groundwater. At 8:45, Mr. Henderson arrived. He was the senior loan officer from Riverbend Federal Credit Union. He wore a gray suit that had seen better days and carried a briefcase that looked heavy. He did not smile at me. He nodded, a sharp, professional acknowledgement of a combatant. His presence changed the gravity of the room. This was no longer a family squabble. It was a credit event. At 8:50, my family arrived. My mother, Cynthia, walked in first. She was wearing a cream-colored suit and pearls, her face composed into a mask of tragic dignity. She looked like a widow at a funeral for a husband who hadn't died yet. My father, Grant, walked a step behind her. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him, his shoulders hunched, his eyes fixed on the floor tiles. Elise trailed them, looking pale and nauseous, clutching a bottle of water like a lifeline. They sat in the front row on the left. I sat at a small table facing the room, my laptop open. At 9 o'clock exactly, the glass doors swung open. The Calder group had arrived. Mr. Sterling led the way, flanked by 2 junior associates and the lawyer from Harrow and Bristow. They swept into the room with the confidence of men who owned the mortgage on the building and the souls of the people inside it. Sterling was smiling. It was a predatory, dazzling smile. "Good morning, everyone," Sterling announced, his voice booming without a microphone. "I see we have a full house. Excellent. Let us get this administrative business sorted so we can get back to work." He walked to the front. Expecting to take the podium, I stood up. "Please take a seat. Mr. Sterling," I said. My voice was steady, amplified slightly by the small speaker system I had set up. "This is a shareholder meeting convened under Section 4 of the bylaws. I am the chair." Sterling stopped. He looked at me with amused contempt, then shrugged and sat in the front row on the right, directly opposite my parents. I looked at the room. I looked at the employees, the banker, my terrified sister, my broken father. "I call this meeting to order," I said. The room went silent. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen display. "We are here to discuss the financial health of Ward and Finch Kitchens," I began. "And we are here to vote on a proposed amendment to our credit facility, a general security agreement that would place a lien on all company assets in favor of the Calder Group." I clicked a button on my remote. The screen behind me lit up. "But before we vote on the cure," I said, We must understand the disease. The slide showed a graph. It was the one Simon Vale and I had built in the basement. It showed 2 lines. One was red, plunging downward, the official numbers. The other was green, climbing steadily, the actual performance. Over the last 6 months, I said, the board has been told that the company is in distress. We have been told that revenue is falling, that costs are spiraling, and that our only hope is to liquidate assets and bring in outside capital. I looked at Sterling. He was not smiling anymore. He was tapping something into his phone. This narrative is false, I said. A ripple of whispers went through the back of the room. I clicked to the next slide. It showed a side-by-side comparison of lumber costs. In April, I continued, under the advice of our strategic partners, we switched lumber suppliers. We moved from Miller Brothers, our partner of 30 years, to global sourcing partners. We were told this would save 20%. I pointed to the screen. In reality, due to waste, shipping delays, and defect rates, our material costs have increased by 40%. We are paying more for worse wood, and we are missing delivery dates. I looked at Marco in the back. Marco, I said, how many remakes did we do last week? Marco cleared his throat. 12, he said loudly. Highest in 10 years. The wood is wet. Madeline, it warps before we can cut it. Thank you. Marco. I turned back to the room. This is not legacy inefficiency, I said. This is manufactured failure. We are being advised to make decisions that hurt our business, and then we are being billed for that advice. I clicked to the next slide. It showed the consulting fees, $120,000 a month. Sterling stood up. Objection, he said smoothly. This is a confidential board matter. Ms. Ward is disclosing proprietary financial data to non-shareholders. I moved to clear the room. This is a shareholder meeting, I said, and under Ohio law, I am allowed to invite advisors and stakeholders. Mr. Henderson holds our debt. The staff builds our product. They stay. Mr. Henderson leaned forward. I would like to hear what she has to say, the banker said. His voice was dry and authoritative. Sterling sat down, but his eyes were hard. I turned to Simon Vale. He was sitting in the second row, clutching his briefcase. Mr. Vale, I said, as our controller, can you explain why our profit and loss statement shows a loss for May? Simon stood up. His legs were shaking, but he straightened his tie. I was instructed to reclassify capital improvements as operating expenses, he said, his voice trembling. And I was told to defer revenue from 3 major installs until Q3. By whom? I asked. Simon pointed a shaking finger at Sterling. By the Calder Group, he said. They said it was conservative accounting. The room erupted. Mr. Henderson was writing furiously in his notebook. My mother was staring at Simon as if he had pulled a knife on her. So, I said, raising my voice over the murmurs, we have a company that is actually profitable, being made to look insolvent by consultants who have a financial incentive to force a liquidation. I walked around the table and stood in front of my sister. Elise sat frozen, her face pale. And that brings us to the leadership, I said gently. Elise, I said, on May 12th, you signed a document transferring control of the company to yourself. You became the CEO. She nodded. A tiny, jerky movement. Was there a board meeting, I asked. Did we vote? No, she whispered. Speak up, please, I said. No, she said, her voice cracking. Dad just brought the papers to the house. Mom said I had to sign them. Did you read them? No. Did you want the job? No, she cried out. Tears spilled over her lashes. I told them I didn't want it. I told them you should do it. Then why did you sign? I asked. Because they said Dad was in trouble. She sobbed. They said if I didn't sign, we would lose the house. They said the bank was going to foreclose. I looked at Mr. Henderson. Mr. Henderson. I said, was Riverbend Federal planning to foreclose on Ward and Finch in May? The banker looked up over his glasses. Absolutely not, he said. Your payments were current. We had no concerns until the restructuring started. I turned to the room. There was no crisis. I said, there was only a panic created to force a change in control, to lock me out. I pointed to the back of the room. 2 weeks before I graduated, my access to the servers was revoked. My key card was deactivated. That is not succession planning. That is a hostile takeover from the inside. My mother stood up. Her face was flushed with blotchy red patches. "This is enough," she shouted. She turned to the employees. "Don't listen to her. She is jealous. She has been jealous of her sister since they were children. She is trying to tear this family apart because she didn't get the crown." She looked at me with pure venom. "You are ungrateful. Madeline, after everything we did for you, after we paid for your degree, you come back here and humiliate your father? You were never meant for this business. You don't have the heart for it." I looked at her. For the first time in my life, her anger didn't scare me. It just looked sad. "You're right, Mom," I said. "I don't have the heart to lie to the people who work for us." I walked back to my table and picked up a document. It was a photocopy, old and grainy. "You kept telling me I wasn't meant for this." I said, "You told me Grandfather didn't want me here. You told me he chose Dad, and that Dad chose Elise." I held up the paper. "This is a copy of a letter Silas Ward wrote 3 days before he died." I said, "The original was in his desk. It was stolen and scanned by my mother 3 weeks ago." Cynthia gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth. But Grandfather was a careful man. I continued. "He filed a copy with his safe deposit box at the bank. He named me as the trustee for that box. I retrieved it yesterday. I began to read, to my son Grant and my granddaughter Madeline. If you are reading this, I am gone. I built this company with my hands. But a company needs more than hands. It needs a head and a heart. Grant, you are the heart. You care about the people, but you have always been afraid of the fight. You let the world push you. Madeline, you are the head. You have the steadiest judgment of anyone I know. You see the truth even when it is ugly. My wish is for a partnership. Grant as chairman, Madeline as CEO. One to care for the people, one to steer the ship. Do not let the wolves in. Do not take shortcuts. And above all, never lie about the wood." I lowered the paper. The room was so quiet I could hear the rain dripping from the eaves outside. "He didn't choose Elise," I said softly, "and he didn't choose Dad alone. He chose us. He wanted us to work together." I looked at my father. He was weeping silently, his head in his hands. "Dad," I said, "why did you hide this?" He didn't answer. "Mr. Sterling stood up again. He looked bored. "This is very touching," he said. "A voice from the grave. But it is legally irrelevant. The shares were transferred. The contract with Calder Group is valid. And the debt is real." He turned to the banker. "Mr. Henderson, we are prepared to execute the lien amendment today. It is the only way to secure the additional capital required to stabilize the—" "Sit down. Sterling?" The voice was a roar. It came from the front row. Grant Ward stood up. He looked shaky, like a man waking up from a long coma. But he was standing. "Dad?" Elise whispered. Grant walked to the front of the room. He stood next to me. He looked at the employees. He looked at the banker. Finally, he looked at Sterling. "It is not irrelevant," my father said. His voice was thick with tears, but it was loud. "It is the only thing that matters." He turned to the room. "I hid the letter," he said. "I hid it 20 years ago, and I hid it again last month." "Why?" "Grant?" Mr. Henderson asked softly. "Because I was afraid." My father said. He looked at me, and his eyes were begging for forgiveness. "In 1998, he said, addressing the room, "we had a claim against the company. A man named Miller said he owned 1/3 of the business. He had a paper. It was a valid claim. Grandfather had made a deal in the early days and forgotten it. My mother was shaking her head frantically. "Grant, no, stop. I paid him off," my father continued, ignoring her. "I didn't have the cash personally, so I used company funds. I created a fake vendor. I embezzled $200,000 and paid him to go away." A gasp went through the room. Embezzlement. It was a word that carried prison time. I paid it back, he said quickly. Over 10 years. I put it all back. The company never lost a dime, but the crime was on the books. He pointed at Sterling. 6 months ago, the Calder Group came to me. They had bought the debt from Miller's estate. They had the old ledger. They knew what I did. He took a deep breath. They told me I had a choice. I could go to prison and lose the company, or I could hire them. They said they would fix the business. They said they would make us so rich that the past wouldn't matter. He looked at the floor, but they didn't fix it. They started stripping it. They made me fire Abernathy. They made me hire their lawyers. They made me give the company to Elise because they knew Madeline would find the ledger. He looked at Elise. I am so sorry, baby. I put you in the line of fire to save myself. He looked at me, and I locked you out because I knew you were too smart to let them get away with it. He turned back to Sterling. The debt isn't real, he said. The distress isn't real. The only thing that is real is that I committed a crime 20 years ago, and I have been paying blackmail ever since. He looked at Mr. Henderson. I am ready to resign. Bob, and if you need to call the police, I will wait here. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a structure collapsing, the dust settling after the demolition. Then, Mr. Henderson stood up. He walked over to my father. He didn't put handcuffs on him. He put a hand on his shoulder. We will discuss the governance issues later. Grant, the banker said, right now, I am more interested in the consulting contract. He turned to Sterling. If you obtained this contract through extortion, Mr. Henderson said, his voice cold as steel, then it is void ab initio, and if you have been manipulating the financials to trigger a liquidation clause, that is bank fraud. Sterling's face turned a shade of purple I had never seen before. He snapped his briefcase shut. This is slander. He hissed. We have a signed agreement. We have a confession of embezzlement. We will sue you into the ground. We will own this building by Christmas. He looked at me. You think you won, little girl? You just sent your father to jail. I looked at him. I felt a calm so profound it was almost frightening. Maybe, I said, but he is a free man now. And you? You are just a parasite that lost its host. Sterling turned to his lawyers. We are leaving. File the injunction. They stormed out of the showroom. The glass doors swung shut behind them, the sound echoing like a gavel. The room exhaled. Elise was sobbing quietly. My mother was sitting stone still, staring at the wall, her world having finally, irrevocably shattered. I looked at the board, or what was left of it. Me, Elise, my father. I moved to suspend the contract with Calder Group immediately, I said, and to retain independent counsel to investigate the billing fraud. Elise looked up. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. Second, she whispered, all in favor? Aye, said my father. Aye, said Elise. Aye. I said, the motion carries. I looked at the employees. They were looking at us, at the mess, at the crime, at the tears, but they weren't leaving. Kenny, the custodian, stepped forward. So, Miss Madeline, he said, his voice scratching the silence, does this mean we are going back to the old wood? I looked at Marco. I looked at Nora. Yes, Kenny. I said, we are going back to the old wood. The meeting broke up. It wasn't a celebration. It was a triage. Mr. Henderson took my father into the conference room to start the long, painful process of unwinding the financial damage. My mother drove herself home. Alone. I found Elise in the break room. She was washing her face in the sink. I'm sorry, she said into the towel. I was so weak. You were scared. I said, there is a difference. She looked at me in the mirror. What happens now? She asked. Is Dad going to jail? Maybe, I said honestly. We will have to see. But the truth is out. We can fight the lawsuit. We can rebuild the credit. She turned around and leaned against the counter. You know, she said, a small, sad smile touching her lips. You really are the head, and Dad is the heart. And you? I asked. She looked at her hands. the hands that had been forced to sign away our legacy. "I think I am the eyes," she said. "I saw it happening. I just didn't know how to stop it." We walked out onto the showroom floor. The lights were still on. The growth poster was still hanging in the office upstairs. I walked up the stairs. I went into the executive office. I took the poster off the wall. I dropped it in the trash can. I opened the bottom drawer of the desk, the one with the broken latch. It was empty, but I knew what belonged there. I sat in the chair. It squeaked. We were exposed. We were vulnerable. The lawsuits would come. The bank would be watching us like hawks. My father's reputation was ruined. My mother would never forgive me. But as I looked out the window at the parking lot, where the trucks were lining up to load the day's deliveries, I felt a strange sense of peace. The rot was gone. We had burned it out. Now, we could build. Thank you for listening to Revenge Stories. This brings us to the end of Madeline's battle for Ward Finch Kitchens. I hope you enjoyed this journey through the dark corridors of family secrets and corporate betrayal. I would love to hear from you. Where are you listening from today? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next tale of justice and retribution. Share your thoughts on Madeline's choice. Did she do the right thing by exposing her father to save the company? Until next time, keep your eyes open and your judgment steady.